Right at London Airport.
But as a picture of family dynamics, it's wonderful, because the father is so dependent on the mother, and if she's gone, he's got nothing to support him, so he goes too. And Harold is the one who has to be strong. He's the one who has to stand there strong and say, I will not faint, I'm going to have to deal with this. I'm going to have to deal with me.
There is something else to be said. There was no one else to turn around and say, better look out for this. the domino theory of domestic politics. But
that's symbolic, isn't it? That he couldn't faint, because someone's got to, the buck's got to stop someone. Someone's got to be responsible.
Right. And I think that...
I don't want to make too much of it.
But it is emblematic of his world, isn't it?
It is.
That kind of strange action that could take place.
Grotesque to one side. But you see...
Without any predictability whatsoever.
No,
that's right.
But when you said earlier, you know, that he was so sensitive, some people can avoid the horrors and sidestep them. He couldn't, and your story is apropos of that too. He had to confront them, and as you brought up very acutely earlier, the horrors in Ashes to Ashes are so vivid, so unbearably vivid, that actually in the play, when in this game of sexual politics they play, someone I know wrote a very good essay about it in the latest Pinter Memorial volume. I forget his name, a short, dark actor of Jewish extraction. But he... Good God! It's you, good God, Corrado's disguised again. But he, when she starts talking, and the man I loved and worshipped, etc., snatched the babies from the arms of their screaming mothers. And it's he, the enormously territorially processive, dominant power figure, who gives in and has to avoid it and says, have you seen Kid and the Kids?
Yeah.
You know, it's a marvellous moment. But Harold recreated those horrors. And when people say, but this was something she experienced, it's quite clear that she didn't, because it says the play takes place now.
Yes.
Well, he's so fascinated by time and memory and the eternal. The fact that in a Proustian way, that memories, nothing can be relied upon, and yet everything happened. And even if it was merely a part of one's own mythology, the attachment to the reality of that is something to be ruthlessly held on to.
Yes.
And
like the marvellous speech of Hearst about the photographs of the dead.
Yes.
It is a wonderful evocation of what you've just said, his sense of memory, and yet at the same time the sense of what, the total shifting, as you all mentioned.
Tender the dead as you yourself would be tendered in what is the word? Not laughingly. Call your life.
Yes, it's a marvellous word, isn't it? I can't remember it.
It's not laughing.
So, Henry, I want to ask you a horrible question.
Anything. But take your hand off my knee first.
How do you tender the dead with Harold? How do you keep your... Do you have to pay attention to it, or is it simply in your heart always? Is he with you? Is he here now?
Well, he's, of course, when we talk about him, he comes more alive. But sometimes I'll open a book, and it'll say, to Henry from Harold, and just occasionally I come across something he's written to me, not a letter maybe, but something, and then he's enormously close, because it will be his actual words on an actual piece of paper. And then he comes bounding into one's life, because what a discussion like this can't capture is his extraordinary energy. And he would come in, and immediately life became terribly easy, because he more or less said, I'll buy all the drinks in everybody's life in this room for the next 3 hours. And suddenly we're in the sort of going along with the Titanic or something, with his appetite for life. It was amazingly relaxing. And he must live for you tremendously. And of course around him there is this, a mythology is bound to grow up around a famous figure. So people's accounts the further we get away from his life, people's accounts will vary. And that's why I think Harry's film is so important. And this discussion is, in a way, to have a living fossil like me and two young, handsome, virile men like yourself here. It does establish something. While we're still in touch with him, he's just over there. Soon it won't be possible. I'll be gone and what thing, and there'll be words. But actually, what we have are not just words, but actually memories, things that happened. And also, before we get too serious about it, terribly funny things
I
happen.
suddenly feel very, very depressed.
Oh, do you, poor fellow. But he was also, we laughed all the time. He may have written passionately moving and terribly cruel plays, not that he's cruel, but the plays, terrible things are done to Stanley in the birthday party, etc., etc. But they also, these plays, Estlin, that comedy of menace is a marvellous phrase. But in life, we spent most of our time laughing. Many a time I've wished he hadn't become famous, because I'd have seen so much more of him before the world took him up. We used to bowl about penniless but laughing. I remember one time he said to me, "Henry, have you ever heard of coffee ice cream?" I said, "What?" He said, "Coffee." I said, "I've heard of coffee. I've heard of ice cream. I don't know much about coffee ice cream." He said, "Oh, I've heard about it. Let's go down the cafe. Got any money?" I said, "Hold on a minute. I've got about, the equivalent of 75 cents. I said, "Do you think I'll do it?" "Yes." Right, he came and said, "2 coffee ice creams, please." Let's see, 2 coffee ice creams. All right. So he poured. There's no coffee in the world worse than Hackney Cafe coffee in 1948. So he pours 2 coffees. Let me look at it. He puts a big scoop into the ice cream barrel and goes plop, plop. And then the result is a ghastly mixture of muck. Absolute muck. We looked at it, I said, "Is that coffee ice cream?" "No, it's is that coffee ice cream?" "That's what you asked for, wasn't it?"
In the course of our conversation, we've talked about a number of the plays. And as you know, this theater is going to have a festival of Pinter plays this coming summer, July and August. And we've talked about No Man's Land, and we've talked about Old Times, and made reference to, and have we mentioned The Dumbwaiter and Celebration? But those are the 4 major plays that we're going to be presenting. And I just wonder if in England you're familiar with anything of this nature having occurred in recent times, that those numbers of plays have been produced by a theater more or less running in repertory.
Not in the recent times, no. And I mean, it's arguable that the London theatre has neglected to produce Harold on a regular, sufficiently regular basis. Sheffield Crucible did a festival a few years ago, a major production of The Caretaker. But no, I think this is a wonderful thing. I'm personally hoping to do something similar myself next year. But no, in London, in England, Harold is, I think, underproduced.
Well, that was certainly my raison d'etre for attempting this thing, which started out as readings of the plays, because in my view he was greatly underrepresented here, with the exception of the one play, Betrayal, which is regarded as his, quote, accessible, unquote, play, and commercially viable. But he's always been a great love of mine. You know, there's been Shakespeare and there's been Pinter, fundamentally, and with a few others sort of thrown in for spice. But